Hello, everyone, and welcome back to High Energy Podcast. I'm your host, Esteban Gast, and I'm so excited about today's episode because we're talking about a topic that is not just important, it's like very important. It's crucial for all of us living in Southern California. And today we're talking about decarbonization. Decarbonization sounds like one of those big, scary science words, but don't worry. We're not going to give you like a chemistry lesson, but by the end of this episode, here's the hope, okay? That by the end of this episode, you'll be able to like casually drop decarbonization in conversation with your friends, and they'll just be like, wow, that person has learned a lot. And you'll be like, yeah, sorry, I'm late. I was just researching decarbonization. And then you will be the coolest person that anyone has ever met. Okay, I want to start with a quick story. A little bit ago, I was driving through the San Gabriel Valley, and it was one of those days where the smog was like really, really thick. It was like so thick you could like chew it, you know, it like felt threatening. You couldn't even see the mountains. And it made me think about the climate policies. A lot of times when you hear about climate policies, they're saying, oh, by 2050, by 2030. And it's sort of these things that feel off into the future. And something I was thinking about was like, wait a minute, the like decarbonization, these things that we're talking about today aren't about this far off future. They're actually about our daily lives, our health now, the health of our children and our friends, and like also making sure that Southern California doesn't turn into like a dystopian movie. So decarbonization sounds like this buzzword, but it's really about getting rid of smog, cleaning up our air, and keeping our home as beautiful as we know it can be. So here to make sense of all of this, okay, here to give us those decarbonization facts, we've got Jakub Zielkiewicz with us today. He's the director of climate planning at ICF, which basically means he's one of the people figuring out how to make sure that LA doesn't look like Mad Max in the next few decades. He's anti-Mad Max. We're going to dig into what decarbonization really means for our city, the challenges we're up against, and how each of us can do our part. Jakub, thank you so much for being on the show.
Esteban, very nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh my gosh, of course. How did you get into your line of work? What is like the brief origin story of Jakub arriving at Director of Climate Planning?
Great question. So, I mean, I've always just been interested in the outdoors, went camping growing up as a kid, and realized that, you know, hey, I should be doing something more in this space and doing more to fight that pollution and the smog that we see in the LA skyline. And started in a career working for a small consulting company, worked for government for a while, and now back in consulting, trying to help decarbonize, which we'll talk about today.
I'm so happy that you went on a few camping trips that inspired you to do this. Can you imagine? You could have been at home not going camping and we wouldn't have a director of climate planning. You'd just be somewhere else.
Yeah, it's for me, it was just that childhood upbringing of like, get out into nature, you know, go join the scouts, go camping. And that was kind of the impetus, I suppose. But I'm sure there were lots of other things, right? Studying it in college and being surrounded by friends who are working in the field as well. There's the community influences as well.
Okay, let's get into this big word, decarbonization. For people who might not know what it is, or just like, I feel like I hear it a lot. People are decarbonization. Like, treat me like I'm like a kindergartner, because what exactly does decarbonization mean? And you and I are both in Southern California. Like, what does that actually mean here in Southern California? My thought is it means that more people will go camping and enjoy it and then become director of climate planning. Like, yeah, can you break down what that actually is?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's certainly a buzzword. It's being used a lot, right? Decarbonization, sustainability, lots of buzzwords, but really decarbonization, it's the process of reducing carbon dioxide emissions, right? So you said you didn't want to get into chemistry. I'm not going to go there, but carbon dioxide, that's really the result of, our human activities, and specifically from burning fuel products like natural gas and gasoline and diesel. And so really the goal at the end of the day of decarbonization is to reduce the amount of carbon dioxide that we emit, that we release into the atmosphere, since that contributes to climate change, and we want to reduce those impacts of climate change. And so, what that means for LA, and you kind of alluded to the smog that we breathe and we see, is exploring and adopting alternative options to what we use on a daily basis. The appliances, the cars, the equipment, the machines, the factories, all the stuff that burns fossil fuels. Just exploring the alternatives. And I'll note that many of the alternatives already exist today. So it's really a matter of knowing about them and adopting them and using them.
Is there stuff that is happening specifically in LA? I know from my point of view, LA has like these ambitious goals for cutting down carbon emissions right there, for decarbonizing. What are some of the specific strategies that the city is doing? Like, are there high-tech solutions, or is it kind of what you're saying? Is it as simple as like, hey, let's use a little bit less energy, or whatever that looks like?
Great question. I mean, you're right. LA has some great goals, and just over the past 5 years, LA adopted something called the Green New Deal, and so really that's a comprehensive plan aimed at addressing climate change, at promoting sustainability in the city, at decarbonizing. And so there, the key components are zero carbon electricity, zero carbon transportation, zero carbon buildings, zero waste, zero water. And again, you mentioned kind of 2050 and some of these goals that are identified. It is by 2050, but we're seeing some of the actions starting to be done today. And so again, what does that mean functionally, right? Like, these goals will require the technology solutions that you mentioned. So yeah, zero emission vehicles, the charging infrastructure, more renewable energy such as solar and wind and battery and energy storage systems, other technical solutions like energy efficiency upgrades, right? So to decarbonize our buildings, we got to do more efficient lighting, we got to do insulation, we got to electrify our appliances. There's a lot of technology solutions that are available, but you also mentioned behavior change, which I think is great. And so there are simple interventions, right? Like in the summers or late summers, there's these heat waves. And so we come home and we flip on the AC. There's a behavior change there where we can pre-cool our homes, right? Especially with, all the technology out there, the Nest and all that stuff. We can set our timers to cool our homes a little bit earlier so that when we get home, it's already cool. And then we could turn it off during that peak time of day. There's also other interventions, right? Behavior changes where we can minimize the use of some of those energy intensive appliances during peak hours. And even with transportation, right? There's, I know we're a car centric culture and it's a big basin to get through, but consideration of perhaps walking, biking, taking micromobility, public transit more often where available. There's something to say about that, and just considering that in our behavior changes on a daily basis.
I love it. So it really is like all hands on deck. You're looking at, like, it feels like every part of the city and the county and the region, and like every part of, you wake up and then like behavior change from the, like, what is that with something that's so big that feels just enormous? Like, how do you start to think about that? Do you prioritize things? Do you like have different teams, or do you separate behavior versus infrastructure? Like, how do you start to make sense of something that is such an enormous goal, which, they're kind of like, hey, Jacob, can you rethink society? And can you do that by 5 p.m. So we can take the weekend off?
There's a lot of brilliant people working in this space that have tremendous ideas and are pushing them through government, pushing them through the private sector, pushing them in our communities. And so it's really being able to identify them and say, hey, this city is doing X, perhaps we could consider that in our community. So it's looking at my own actions and trying to improve on a daily basis, but in working with clients and working with my community and with city officials, there's also drawing on a wealth of knowledge and literature that's available to help them in their journey.
What are some of the challenges that you see getting in the way, or what are like the main hurdles that LA is facing? And how are we going to challenge these challenges? How are we going to?
Yeah.
That'd be amazing if you just say, these are the challenges, and then you go, and that's it, Esteban, and we're hoping done. You figure it out. Yeah. So what are the challenges? And how are we thinking through them?
There's no doubt. I mean, we hear it all around us, right? Decarbonization, climate change, because it is a challenge and it is a struggle, and there's a lot of barriers to that. And so, I'll provide a couple of examples and ideas that are being explored or that have worked already in overcoming those challenges. And so, for instance, access to clean transportation is certainly a challenge, and especially in Los Angeles. And what that means is, there's a couple of different components. There's, proximity to clean, safe, reliable transit. There's the infrastructure that we use for biking, for walking, for micromobility, like if there's a crack in the sidewalk or if it's not a safe, dedicated lane for my bike or scooter, then I don't feel safe. Maybe I don't want to take that option, right? And then there's also access to these zero emission vehicles, and are they affordable? Is there adequate charging infrastructure for me to get around? And so there's already a lot of actions that are occurring in this space. And so what we'll need to do is just, quite frankly, double down on them. And so examples of this include, for instance, LA Metro's campaign, such as Keep Metro Safe and Clean. Also, their prioritization of funding in this fiscal year for more frequent and reliable bus and train services. So they're putting their money where their mouth is, and they're dedicating funds in order to prioritize these things. There's also the expansion of the transit network. We're seeing ongoing discussions with the Purple Line extension. There's a regional connector project happening in downtown LA. So there's real money being invested in these projects to make transit more affordable, more reliable, more safe, more clean. Yeah. There's also another example, if I can jump into it, but buildings, right? So we talked about transportation, but the buildings, they're a huge contributor of emissions in our city. And so those are really being addressed through a couple of different things, right? One is that most new buildings that are being constructed, they have to be all electric. So that's great for that decarbonization aspect. But then also in parallel, the electricity that's being provided to those buildings is going to be carbon-free electricity. So it's kind of hitting that decarbonization from both sides, which is amazing from a decarbonization perspective. So those are just a couple of examples of the interventions that are working.
Yeah, I love it. I love anything that's got double decarbonization powers. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Okay, what are some of the things those are such great examples? And as you were talking, I was thinking, oh yeah, like I live in Culver City, and the bike infrastructure has gotten so much better. Like I feel safer riding my bike, so I am riding my bike way more. What are some of the other things that, like, what are practical things that individuals, right, our listeners, people who like are thinking about their day-to-day lives, what are things that we can do to support decarbonization, or what are things that we can start thinking about what it looks like to, like, for an individual to contribute to these really incredible goals?
A few things that jump to mind. There's, the practical everyday tips, and then there's also kind of the bigger picture changes. And so I'll start with kind of the latter, the more tricky one, I suppose, of the bigger picture changes. And that's, I would say, organize, ask questions, get to know your options, and use your voting power. And so, like, organize, what I mean by that is engage or continue engaging with your community to identify what really works best for you and for your community. And so, like, be it access to electric vehicle charging infrastructure, be it safer sidewalks to walk or bike on, cleaner and more efficient water heaters. I mean, that would be awesome if there were a community meeting dedicated to cleaner and more efficient water heater. Like, that's super wonky, but, maybe that's what we need to start doing. But then also, asking questions, getting to know your options. So there's so many products out there, be it vehicles, transit passes, appliances. Look at your utility bill, and there's so many different tariffs on there that you can pay, right? And so my philosophy is like, if you want to buy something, a salesperson will very gladly speak to you to answer your questions because they want to sell you that product, right? And so talk to that salesperson, whether it's at the utility or whatever, like talk to them. Talk to a plumber or an appliance salesperson about what the difference is between a heat pump water heater and an electric resistance water heater. Like, get the information, right? Like, maybe call your utility company and ask them what the time of use tariff is. Like, what is that? And if I were to switch to it, can I save money on it? Can I save money based on like my monthly energy usage? Like, there's real money attached to it. Why wouldn't I want to be a little curious about it to see if I can save some cash, right? So I think there's an element of just asking questions, getting to know the options. I mentioned voting power. So that's critical. It's, on the top of everyone's mind now with the election cycle coming up. But more importantly is, your local representatives, right? Get in touch with them. And I think share the vision that you and your community want for your community, right? Work with them, collaborate with them, talk to them, and vote for them or for somebody else who really represents your vision of what your community looks like. I'll get off my high horse with all that. I also mentioned the practical tips, right? So we talked about some of them about, pre-cooling your home or, doing some of those simple interventions. There's also other things like lighting, right? If you look a lot around your home, what type of light bulbs am I using? There's something to say about LED lighting. That's a lot more efficient than some of your more traditional technologies, and that's a simple fix. When you're purchasing appliances, there's something called the Energy Star label. Look for that. And that's, a federal label that in essence speaks to the energy efficiency or energy savings of an appliance. And there's also, again, real money behind that. So the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power offers rebates for Energy Star appliances as well. When replacing a water heater or your air conditioning system, look into heat pumps. Again, a technology that's been up and coming. In essence, it's like how a refrigerator works, right? That's been around for a while, but now that same technology is being applied to water heaters and air conditioning and heating systems. And so again, there's incentives for those types of appliances as well. I mentioned consideration of transportation options, right? So walking, biking, micromobility, public transit. Get familiar with your local routes, see if that makes sense for your daily commute. And then also, vehicles, right? We love our cars, but there's also a lot more electric vehicle options coming out every year. And so really consider purchasing or leasing an electric vehicle for your daily commute, and that might really be an option. Yeah.
That's so good. Our show notes are going to have so many resources. It's wild. We're just going to copy and paste the transcript of what you just said, and people will scroll and be like, that is good. I understand why he's in the position he's in. This is great. I'm curious, Jakub, are there stories that, when you were talking, you made the joke of like getting together and being like, water heaters, let's have a community conversation on that, which first off, I love. And secondly, we should. Are there examples of like community-led initiatives that have happened in Southern California? Like, are we seeing people come together and be like, these are some of the things we want, or this is something that we demand or need or would like? Does that question make sense? I'm curious what it looks like, individual, societal, and then sort of this middle space of like community-driven impact.
Yeah, there's a few examples that jump to mind. I'll look at an example or talk about an example, which this is actually something that ICF and my colleagues are supporting through the County of Los Angeles that administers the Southern California Regional Energy Network, or SoCalREN, as it's known. And that's really to bring together a wide variety of services with one common goal, which is to achieve levels of energy savings throughout Southern California. The examples there that kind of jump to mind is that SoCalRen offers a lot of different programs. And there's one program called the Public Agency Program, where, for example, over the past few years, 18 agencies from throughout Southern California have come together from across the region, and they've replaced about 100 conventional water heaters with cleaner heat pump water heater alternatives at their facilities, right? So just the coordination between the different agencies, the ability to apply for funding and to do it through the SoCalRen initiative, I think is testament to that. Another example is for multifamily homes. The El Sereno apartments in a disadvantaged community in Pomona, which are a SoCalRen energy efficiency success story. And so this example included incentives from SoCalRen to this multifamily home complex for energy efficient lighting, for efficient flow shower heads, for new electric hot water heaters, and other interventions to help decarbonize. And so if you think about it, there's, it's a win-win, right? There's energy savings for the tenants, so they get to lower their utility bills and save money on a monthly basis. But for the owner of the property, it's also a cost-effective means of upgrading their property. So again, that win-win.
I love it. Thanks for sharing.
Yep.
Okay, one more question, then we go to listener questions. And one of my favorite things about climate is that it intersects with everything. Like there's nothing that climate doesn't touch. Can you talk about decarbonization and how it intersects with other issues that we're thinking about in LA, like equity, and like and social justice and issues and public health? Like when you're thinking about decarbonization, are you also thinking of the way that it intersects with all these other aspects of life here in Los Angeles?
Absolutely. I mean, this is it's been a huge issue. It continues to be a huge issue, and it's I don't want to discount it. It's all related, right? And so, we started off the show by talking about that image of smog in LA or in the San Gabriel Valley, right? And so again, burning of that fuel is directly related to air quality, whether it's from our factories or vehicles, whatever. Very strong image of smog, right? And so, don't get me wrong, LA deserves a lot of credit, and the state deserves a lot of credit for improving its air quality tremendously since the 1960s. There's photos on, Google Images or whatever of the 1960s LA skyline, which is just horrendous compared to what it is today, but the population is exponentially larger. So we've done a lot. And, there's been regulations for controlling emissions from our vehicles, from our gasoline. But nonetheless, LA still suffers from some of the worst air quality in the nation. And that's outdoor air quality, right? You also have kind of the indoor air quality inside of our buildings that we sit in our offices. And that's related to, the burning, the combustion of byproducts from whether it's tobacco smoke, gas stoves, fireplaces, wood burning stoves. There's a lot of appliances that we have that burn fuel, and that all gets kind of emitted in our indoor air quality. And so I guess where I'm going with this is linking, burning of fuel to poor air quality, and then also the public health impacts. And so there are public health impacts from poor air quality, and they affect both short and long-term health. That includes, respiratory issues like asthma, bronchitis, cardiovascular problems such as heart attacks, strokes, lung cancer, and the list goes on. I mean, the links are pretty clear. And so linking this all back to decarbonization, the benefits of decarbonizing and the benefits of burning less fuel is linked to improved air quality and is linked to improved public health outcomes.
You can directly tie decarbonization to like healthier communities, more equitable communities, a more equitable city.
Absolutely. I mean, and government certainly recognizes that. I'll note, and working in California government for years, and currently advising governments and programs, this is evident. I'll mention one example, which is actually a very big recent win for Los Angeles. And I think it actually hits on many of the themes that we've touched on today, including communities getting together. And so there was a $329 million grant from the California Energy Commission to the County of Los Angeles for a program that's called the Southern California Equitable Building Decarbonization Coalition. And so that award, it's I think maybe a month or so since it's been announced, but that award, it will accelerate residential building decarbonization efforts. And it's primarily focused for and in low-income communities across Southern California. And so again, some of the things that we talked about, installing energy-efficient electric appliances, upgrading, energy efficiency measures in low-income households, that's all captured by this program, or will be captured by the program. And then in terms of the community action and inclusion, that endeavor has consisted of 55 local community-based organizations, local groups, local energy providers, regional energy networks such as SoCalRen, local government. So it's really kind of all hands on deck. This is just ongoing, right? It's been happening for the past several years. It'll continue happening with this infusion of capital. And at the end of the day, community input, energy savings in buildings, improved indoor and outdoor air quality, public health benefits, and of course, how could I forget decarbonization? I mean, that's what this initiative is really all about.
That's so good. That's really great. That it feels like there's a lot of momentum. Like it feels like things are, even you being like, oh yeah, this, whatever, this big chunk of money came specifically to do this. That's really encouraging.
And over the past month, it's fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah. That's perfect. It's like they knew we were going to record this podcast and they're like, let's give Jakub some really good talking points. Let's really set him up for success. To be like, oh, Esteban, you want to know what's happening? How about $300 million? That's so great. Okay, we have two listener questions. You've sort of answered some of them, but let's do it again. Let's really hit them because I think these are such good questions. The first one is from Alex in Santa Monica, and they ask, what is the easiest way for someone living in an apartment to reduce their carbon footprint? Which, brilliant question, because I do think a lot of listeners are like, love it, this is amazing. What happens if I live in an apartment? Like, walk me through what are a few things I can do to reduce my carbon footprint.
Yeah, I would say look at your light bulbs, see if you can change out your light bulbs to LED light bulbs. If you've got, heating, air conditioning, certainly try to pre-cool, especially in the summer months, earlier on in the day, so that you're not using during the peaks. Try to use, your dryers, your ovens, your really energy intensive appliances earlier on in the day when in the afternoon. Of course, if you can, a lot of folks cannot because they're just not home. But with a lot of folks now starting to work from home or working from home, that can be an option. And again, transportation, right? If you're in a place where is supportive of electric vehicles, talk to your landlord, right? A lot of apartments, a lot of multifamily homes, the struggle is, well, like, gosh, I don't want to buy an electric vehicle because where am I going to charge it? And so again, lots more public charging infrastructure going in throughout the LA basin, fantastic. But the convenience of charging it at home, there's something to say about that. And so talk to your landlord. That idea of working with your community, advocate for that in your community, talk to your local representative, say, I live in an apartment and my landlord doesn't agree to putting in a charger. What do I do? How can we design some type of incentive program or rule that'll allow me to charge my car at home? So those are just some ideas that jump to mind.
I love it. Those are wonderful. And I feel like Alex from Santa Monica is going to be like satisfied with that answer. They'll be like, yes, of course. Thank you so much. Okay. One last question from a listener. Jane in San Francisco, she asks, or she wants to know, this is the question, how can I get involved with community programs that support decarbonization efforts? right? I think that actually captures a lot. I think Jane is crushing it with this question, because I think people are like, I want to get involved. I want to do something. What can they do if they're not in government, if it's not part of their job, if it, isn't something like that?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly opportunities within the community, right? If you live in an area where there's like an HOA, or if not, like, that's a great opportunity, especially like we talked about Alex's example of the EV charging, right? Talk to the HOA, see what they can do for you, but also just organize, right? Who is in your community? Get out there, meet people. So there's just kind of that grassroots organization. There's also established infrastructure, right? So there's SoCal Ren, I mentioned. Jane's from the Bay Area, so SoCal Ren's not up there, but there's an equivalent up there called Bay Ren. So the Bay Area Regional Energy Network. Get in touch with them. Get in touch with your regional energy networks, wherever you are throughout California, and see, what information they have, what rebates, what incentives, what programs they have that could potentially benefit you. Maybe there's something on there that you weren't even thinking about previously. And it'll help you explore that, and maybe consider making that change in your home and in your community.
Jakub, this has been so great. You've given so many resources and actionable steps, which is truly like the dream of the podcast, is that at the end people go, okay, there's things I know I can do, and if I feel inspired, I know exactly where to go. Is there anything else before we wrap up that you're like, hey, if this is interesting to you, here's other resources, or here's where you can learn more, or here's where you can get involved? No pressure. You've given us a lot, but I just want to give you one last lob if you're like, hey, check this out.
Yeah, absolutely. I would also say, whatever city you live in, California is pretty ahead of the curve in terms of developing climate action plans. So each city generally has a climate action plan. Check that out. Just Google your city's website and see if they have a climate action plan. If they do, browse through it, see what they call for in there, because it'll give you an indication of what the city is planning to do, right? And if you agree with something, if you don't agree with something, if your city doesn't have a climate action plan, there's another opportunity to engage with your local community that is designing policies, designing incentive programs that at the end of the day will impact you as a resident of that community. So climate action plans is something for everyone in their cities or communities to check out.
I love how, I'm going to keep saying this, but how tangible that is. Someone could immediately finish listening to the podcast and go all the way to the end, because the next 2 to 3 minutes are going to be riveting. Don't you dare leave. But once they're done, 3-ish minutes from now, they could just, climate action plan. That's so good. Okay. This has been such a good chat. Here's some of the highlights I'm thinking about. Okay. That decarbonization is about cleaning up our air, greening our cities. It is at an infrastructure, city, county level. It is at an individual level. There are so many opportunities for community level. We can have conversations with HOA and our landlords and all the different things. We can have conversations with politicians. We can have conversations with these incredible public agencies and groups that are just there to help us in this. And it also feels like LA is tackling this from a bunch of different areas, right? So it's like you were talking transportation, renewable energy, the grid. You're talking about residential big residential buildings with a bunch of people. You're talking about single family homes. You're talking about solar and appliances, air conditioning and stoves and ovens and all those different things. So it really touches every part of our life. And I love when we are still talking about it, it's not just about saving the planet, or it's also about creating a more a healthier, more vibrant, more just community that we all live in and get to enjoy. So this was so great. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today. And thank you for everyone who tuned in. We love the questions. Keep those questions coming. Honestly, Jakub, you had so many good insights from those questions. You can send questions to high energy, hello, high energy podcast at socalren.org. And don't forget to check out all the resources we mentioned. This was an abundance of riches from Jakub, talking about all the ways that in an individual, a community, a tenants union, all these different people we can all jump in and make a difference here. And there's so many resources. And also, we just have to say this. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with your friends and family. We've got so many amazing guests and so many good conversations to come. And I don't want you to miss it. I would be like, oh no, this listener, they missed it. So just make sure to subscribe, and we'll see you here next time. Jakub, thank you for being here. This was so fun, and I learned a ton. I'm sure our listeners had a great time and also learned a lot. So thank you.
Thank you, Esteban. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, I'm so grateful that your family took you camping. Now look at us. Look at where it brought you. And to you, our listener, thank you for listening to High Energy. Together, we can make a real difference. We'll see you next time.